We are fun dorks. System76.
Привет! Это подкаст Linux for Everyone. Добро пожаловать домой.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Linux for Everyone, the podcast about desktop Linux, open source software, and the community creating and enjoying it. My name is Jason Evangelo. I am here at Superfan 3, Denver, Colorado, System76 Headquarters. What a trip. Some disclaimers up front here. This is going to be another, non-standard episode where I'm not going to have the traditional discovery of the week and songs from the source because there is just way too much to try to pack in to this episode. And I need to apologize in advance for the audio quality. This is obviously not my studio sound. My travel microphone is a Blue Yeti, and it's going to pick up on a lot of background noise and just kind of elements of the environment that you may not be used to. So I do apologize for the slightly diminished audio quality, but I do hope that you'll forgive me because hopefully the content in this episode is going to more than make up for it. And I think the best way for me to begin is by telling you I finally get the magic of Linux gatherings. I have been involved in this community for a year and a half. I've been using Linux full time for roughly a year and a half, and I've interacted with so many of you, and we've chatted and we've done gaming together. But man, you get all of these passionate Linux enthusiasts in a room together, and you add on top of that an entire company who is just so fired up about what they're doing and what they're creating and how they are so involved and in love with the community that they're doing it for. And it's like I said, it's just magic. Linux gatherings are pretty incredible, and I hope to go to many more of them now. And I'm very grateful to System76 for giving me the opportunity to do this and to attend Superfan. Gardner, the Linux gamer, was there, and Anthony from Linus Tech Tips, and a whole bunch of ridiculously talented, creative people who offer a lot to this community. So what exactly is the Superfan event, and why does System76 do it? From my impressions and my experience, the company very selectively inviting in a few members of the press and many more members of the community, about 10, 12 members of the community who are actual super fans of this company. And they invite us into their home, into their inner sanctum. They pull back the curtain and took us on a tour of the factory floor where the Thalio is designed, where things are painted and treated and tested and prototyped. And there was a 3-hour roundtable with CEO Carl Richell, with all of their engineers and their software developers and UX team, and just, everyone was there. And their agenda for this roundtable was, here is our roadmap, here are our aspirations, here are our plans to start developing in-house laptops from the ground up. We want to hear your feedback about everything that we're doing. We want to hear your criticisms. We want to hear what we're doing right and wrong. It just went on, and it was just such a deep dive into every facet of System76. But what really stood out to me was CEO Carl Richell. Normally, a CEO is very hands-off for many aspects of the day-to-day operations, right? But everything we were talking about, whether that was the i3-like tiling extension that they're working on for Pop! OS, whether it was Thalio prototypes or I can't even list them all, but every single aspect of the business, he was hands-on and knowledgeable and like just fired up about all of it. So anyway, the Superfan event actually began the night before at the 1UP Arcade Bar in Denver. And this is a really cool place. It's of course a bar for big kids, let's say. There's wall-to-wall classic arcade games. There's 4-player Pac-Man. Every arcade game that you would want to play is probably there. And so it was just, it was Carl and not the entire. And so it was Carl and it was several members of the System76 team just kind of mingling with us and hanging out and having some drinks and playing some games and acting silly. And the next day started at about 8 o'clock. And we took a charter bus over to System76. And the theme of this event was Mission to Thalio. But it was not it was not presented with a lot of detail. We didn't know what to expect at all. So we get into the main lobby and we're signing waivers, damage liability waivers, things like that. Then we were taken into a screening room and shown a pre-mission briefing featuring their HR guy. And that alone was so well done and so intentionally tacky, but also intentionally hilarious that it set such a great tone. It was kind of giving us what to expect on our mission to Thalio, some of the obstacles we'd have to overcome and the data we'd have to acquire. And that was just brilliant. And then we were given our spacesuits, which were actually bomber jackets with the Thalio patch on it. After that, we were taken into the factory floor, but it had been completely transformed. It was black lights all over the place in what looked like different stations that had neon lighting everywhere and kind of this space theme. And they had these RC vehicles that were, 2 wheels and a little, kind of a mechanism on the back where if you hold down this controller, it would jump. And so the goal was to put on a visor and navigate the spaceship through various obstacles and acquire data about the location, right? So, and we started off almost blind because the visors that they were giving us obstructed your view, and so you had to rely on your squad, and there were 3 different squads. And you had to have your squad helping you, and that made it that kind of, gelled everyone together and broke the ice and got everyone kind of working as a team and buddying up and things. There were a few of those, and then there was a mission where we had to land our craft on an asteroid. In reality, these were these very slick drones that had to be piloted through these giant aluminum foil asteroids, and you had to really be precise with the flying of these things, and you couldn't progress until everyone landed on an asteroid. And so that was an absolute blast. And there were of course drones crashing into each other and crashing into the wall. And I did not do too well, but I eventually landed on the asteroid. Anyway, the next station, we were starting to get clues, you see, and we were unlocking data and getting clues. And the third station was where all the clues started to come together. And this was an AR sandbox in the very literal sense. It was a box full of sand that had an AR component. And what it ended up doing is making it look like the topography of a planet. And you could put your hand over certain areas of the planet and watch this rainstorm. And then you'd see these pools of water kind of forming and creating channels and little streams from the rainfall. And we had to mine the planet and we had to dig for clues and more data. And that was really slick. And they did it all with a Raspberry Pi. They even have a guide up on their site on how you can do it yourself. And I highly recommend looking into this because it was dazzling. Anyway, we finally got all the clues together. And our clue was we stand atop the shoulders of giants. And then we were told that we had to pass through the gatekeeper. And so we go into this kind of shrouded area, and the CEO Carl is there in like this green glittery top hat and vest, and he's looking like kind of a Willy Wonka style character. And he was just asking us the solution to the riddle, and we had no idea what it was until the other two teams joined us who had different sets of data. And so we had to get together and figure it out and unlock the mystery, right? The gateway to Thalio. So we passed the gatekeeper, and then we go into a battle. And there are all of these, like probably a couple hundred of these glow-in-the-dark space invaders over in this one corner at all different heights and distances, and a giant box of Nerf guns with like crates of dart ammo. And so we had to take out every single of these space invaders to finally unlock the mystery of Thalio. And this is where the entire Superfan group had their sort of Oprah moment, if you know what I mean. So there's this like kind of a garage door that opened up, and this fog or dry ice is coming out from under the cracks, and it reveals this giant presentation, and there are Thalios sitting there neatly arranged on this table, and each system said designed for our superfans. And there was the Thalio, the Superfan Thalio logo, and then 2019 laser etched in Morse code. And so essentially they gave every one of the attendees a brand new Thalio, but not just the one they've been selling. This is actually kind of the second revision that has improved acoustic properties and better cooling, and like hundreds of little tweaks that they have iterated on since they first launched the Thalio. And so that was just an incredible moment that no one was expecting. After that, once we kind of came back down to earth and the shock, started to settle in that, oh my gosh, we're going home with these brand new Thalios, we got a tour of the factory. And this factory is pretty new, and Carl's going to talk about it a bit in the interview that's coming up later. But we saw, where the sausage is made, right? It's going through and seeing these giant sheets of metal that end up being the various components of Thalio that go through this massive laser cutter. And then it's all of everything, right? Where the screws are inserted into the chassis, and where pieces are fitted and bent and finished, and where all the raw wood materials are. And we saw how those get treated. And absolutely everything that goes into making a system from the ground up. And it was really revealing and insightful. And they just did such a good job of pulling back the curtain, and saying, this is how we do it. And man, I'm still just kind of having a hard time wrapping my head around it and expressing just how much of an impact I think this event made on everyone there, including the System76 team. So after that, there was a roundtable, as I alluded to before, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail for that. Carl will do that, I think, with a lot of what we talked about. This roundtable, it felt like it was very much a roundtable. It was a two-way conversation from people who are both critical and passionate about what System76 is doing, and they were so receptive to that criticism, and they were so grateful for the feedback. And like I said, we just went into the weeds. We spent about 45 minutes just talking to them about their plans to design their own laptops. From things like, well, what size is too big? Millimeters, right? Where is the cutoff point where an ultra thin laptop becomes too thick? And do you want replaceable batteries? And what should the touchpad be like? And how large should that be? And what kind of display properties and what kind of battery properties? And, we're thinking about all these different finishes. And I can't even, I like I said, it's way too much to distill down into a podcast. Hopefully I will have some more content coming from that roundtable. Anyway, guys, the exciting takeaway for me specifically for this roundtable was all of the advancements that are coming, all the improvements that are coming with Pop! OS. And then on the laptop side, they're going to start prototyping in January. And it was made pretty clear that, hey, look, guys, you saw how we kind of put our stamp on the Linux desktop with Thalia. Well, that's what we want to do with our laptops. So I don't know when these things are going to come out. It could be 2-3 years. It could be longer. But I'm very excited to be tracking that progress. And I'm really excited that they have let people from the community in on the ground floor before they even started this. Honestly, I'm finding it difficult to properly convey how awesome this experience was. But I think you'll really get a sense of that with the upcoming interviews with Carl Richell and Kate Hazen. Kate is the creative director, and Carl is the CEO of System76. And I think you'll be able to understand what I mean about this company when you hear it from them. At any rate, I'm very excited about this episode. I'm very excited about what's coming from this company. And for me, it was a real watershed moment, I think, in this newfound Linux obsession and career that I've started developing. I've said, yes, the best thing about Linux is community, but now I've seen it. I've shaken hands. I've, given hugs. I have sat and had beers with some truly brilliant and passionate people who are really trying to make a difference in everything they do, whether it's, a monumental undertaking or just a little thing. But listen, I've spent 20 minutes here just gushing, and there's a lot more to come. So let's just jump right into my interview with System76 CEO Carl Richell. So, as I mentioned, I am here in Denver, Colorado at System76 Headquarters, and I have the privilege of speaking with the CEO of System76, Carl Richell.
Thanks for having me. It's a privilege to have you here, actually. Thanks for coming all the way from Croatia.
Yeah, it's been an absolute blast. It's you guys put so much fun and information into this event that it's such a rarity to be in a company's home, as it were, and just get so much information. Like, here's our roadmap, and we want to hear feedback from you, and what criticisms do you have, and such an open environment that I'm not used to. It's really neat.
And we try to do all of that in an entertaining way as well. I get bored watching keynotes. I think it's a terrible way to talk about a product or to like engage your community. We want to entertain. We want to provide stories. We want to show our ethos and who we are. And that's why Superfan is such a different event. You don't come here and listen to us talk. You come here and you have a lot of fun doing geeky stuff with the people.
Very geeky stuff. Very geeky stuff.
Yeah, and you get to introduce the new technologies and things we're doing, but doing it in a natural and fun way instead of a, being talked at kind of way.
Yeah.
And then we get to spend time, of course, at the roundtable at the end, which is a great opportunity for us to learn from our fans and our customers of how they're using our products, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, ideas they have, and then we take that all back to the drawing board and refine our roadmap from the things we learned from everyone.
So I normally ask my guests their Linux origin story. Tell us kind of from the very beginning,
right?
How that started and why you decided to do that.
Well, I started System76 with a friend of mine, actually, and started it in my basement 14 years ago. We did it because Linux, in my view, had surpassed the quality of Windows and OS X, even at that time, in 2005. But it didn't have good representation in the best way that you can deliver to people, which is through hardware. Now, downloading an ISO or Ubuntu had a great program at that time, a great marketing program called Ship It, where you could sign up and they send you a disk And that spread Ubuntu across the map. They ship you a disk from anywhere in the world, or to anywhere in the world. It was a brilliant idea that put Ubuntu in a lot of people's hands. We were the OEM hardware method, the channel through which another channel through which people could get Ubuntu and get it in a package that was well supported and had actual backed by technical support and guarantees around hardware, the hardware quality and support in Linux. So that was unique in the market at the time. But not because Linux was different, or necessarily even that it was open source, even though that's core to our belief and why it's important. But because it's actually a better product, and I think that's essential to the way that we approach our products. Is that it doesn't matter if it happens to be open source; it really needs to be just a better product.
So what were you selling back then? I mean, specifically hardware wise.
Laptops and desktops is where we started. We started with $1,500. And there was this program from Intel called the White Book program. It just happened to be right time, right place kind of thing. The White Book program was large ODMs, original design manufacturers, taking some of their products off of their manufacturing line and not labeling them with a brand. So it's a White Book. Mm-hmm. Intel was concerned about having about laptops, their customers consolidating with laptops because laptops were much more difficult, and they wanted to support a channel to have more customers than they would if it was just tier 1 OEMs providing notebooks.
Sure.
That was our entry, but that enabled us to do it inexpensively. The first laptop we sold, I actually put a picture of it on the website, having the naive confidence that I would make everything work. And it happened to work out that way. A customer ordered. I had it overnighted to myself because I didn't have any money doing this, and did all of the engineering in the next 2 days to make everything work on that laptop. Created a restore CD because a customer needed to be able to get back to all the things that I had done. And this is really, these are terrible early company kind of things, but that's how it started. It was really gritty, really difficult and challenging, but every challenge that came up, we had to work our way through them. We never had the luxury to throw people at problems. We just couldn't do it. We had to solve the problems, and usually that ended up being engineering for automation, so we could do things more efficiently.
What was your competition like back then?
I think there was Tux Machines or a couple more along those lines. There weren't a lot. And every Linux OEM at that time was selling Linux on another brand. So they were saying, here's a Dell Optiplex, and we'll put Red Hat on it for you. We'll make sure Red Hat works well. So they were providing a good service, but it wasn't necessarily a product. It was a service of taking something off the shelf and making an alternate operating system work on that product.
You said you were doing the engineering to get everything to work on these systems. Right. What did that involve?
Oh, at that time it was miserable. It's much, much better today. We're doing more complex things these days, but it was very, it's things that we take for granted now. Mics usually didn't work. Suspend never worked. Webcams didn't work. Touchpads didn't work. Hotkeys didn't work.
Oh my.
Many things just didn't work. And
so, are we talking about writing drivers for these things, or how? On a technical level, like what did you have to do?
Right, it's writing drivers, configuration.
That's insane.
Yeah, the whole nine to make sure to ensure everything was working. A lot of patches and workarounds and things like that, especially in those early days to get things working. But that was the effort that was necessary to deliver the products in a way that we felt was required to have a good product.
What was the point in the company's history where you started building? You started expanding. What was the tipping point?
I think it was actually, there were 2 points. One was about 5 years in. So the first 5 years was a lot of work. I didn't take a day off. I think the first 3 years. And then we hired a first employee after the first year. It was for tech support. That was eating a lot of time. And so we brought in tech support. Tom Aaron, who's a good friend that I go have a beer with every once in a while. This side story, but he was with the company for 4 to 6 years. I don't recall exactly. But afterwards, he went and started his own company, a dog training company. And now he's one of the premier...
That's a departure.
Now in the U.S., Fetchmasters is his company, and he's like the premier. I forget what it's called exactly, but it's like no harm training. So the dog, no shock collars, none of that kind of thing. So only positive reinforcement training. So so we get together and talk business, and he has his business doing really well, and System76 of course has grown a lot since then. But that he was our first hire, and I think there is some truth to this weird like magic fifth year where it's said that if you make it 5 years, then you've got some legs under you. You can like things have. Maybe you've established a customer base and you've traversed a lot of the most treacherous terrain in building a company by that time. And I think that rung true for us too. I was less worried about money every day at that point. Whereas the years before it was a constant thing. I never understood what an overnight loan was for until I was doing, cash flow with hardware based kind of things. And that became much less tricky after that. And then there was a watershed moment around 2014, 2015, where the products started matching, better matching what the market was really looking for. And so we started taking off there. Building a factory and producing Thaleo was another watershed moment that the company changed dramatically at that point.
How so? Well, I mean, obviously, you were getting into open hardware and creating a unique product from the ground up that really had your stamp on it.
Right.
But did it change the momentum, the mentality of the employees? Like what happened after that came to market?
We were always ambitious. We never really thought something was too challenging. We would just go after it. This was different because for the last 14 years, even though we're an OEM, most of the work of actually designing and producing the product is done in Asia. And while we have input on that design and the BOM, the bill of materials for the components on the motherboard and the components in the laptop and so forth, we had control over that, but we didn't have control over all the design. So we had a lot of pain points with that, not being able to respond to our what we were obvious things to us to make a better product for our customers. And so we decided to take that on ourselves, which meant learning how to produce products, learning how to work with metals, doing all the physical things, like as simple as cutting and bending and painting. And these are all things that we hadn't done before. We moved into our factory in March, and over the course of 9 months, we learned how to produce a physical product and started shipping Thaleo in December of that same year.
Wow. When the first Thaleo shipped, what prototype number was that? Like how many iterations went into that final design before it actually went to market?
So we started the Thaleo project 2 years before we even moved into the factory. And by that time, we had already a few thousand iterations on different components. And from moving from acrylic prototypes, which is where we were, to metal prototypes and then the final product, there's probably 600 iterations along the way of different components. We did a lot of 3D printing. We did a lot of hand cutting things, and then we started farming out some of the metal cutting until we got a metal cutter in house and started doing that here. That was painful because the process was way too slow for us. We'd design something, we'd send it someplace else, and we'd get to test it a couple weeks later. It kind of drove us mad. Yeah. But we're well past that now. Now we're cutting and producing, and the prototypes are moving faster now too. So we're able to, and now the design and the improvements are going to come faster and faster.
There have actually been a lot of improvements to Thaleo since it launched that I think a lot of people don't realize how quickly you guys can iterate and fix a problem. Like you were talking about moving up the drive cage by 1 millimeter or something and being able to instantly execute that fix and ship it.
Yeah. Sometimes you just don't know until you start shipping things. And that's just the nature of producing physical products. It's the nature of producing software as well, frankly. You just can't see all the scenarios that are out there. And so the experience is what teaches you. And so you have to start shipping to gain that experience to learn how to make something better. And one of the very first things was the 2.5-inch drive bay was 1 millimeter beneath the top of the case, and that was enough for the drive to slip out in transit. And so, there's one, small tweak there, and that just resolved that one. Mm-hmm. We had to add GPU braces and custom GPU braces depending on the GPU for a lot of them. shipping desktops is probably one of the most challenging things because these parts are very, very big and they're heavy and they're not secured. They're not secured naturally in a motherboard itself. They require the chassis itself to secure the components. And so it had always been a problem. The difference is now we could ship something, learn what happened, and we could fix it. We couldn't fix these things before.
Well, speaking of software, what made you guys decide to effectively create your own distro? And I want to emphasize that, from what I've seen and heard here, I think there's enough evidence to dispel this notion that, well, it's just a reskinned Ubuntu, right? There's so many things that you guys are doing differently, but what inspired you to create Pop! OS?
I think this was a long time coming, really. We were, in essence, creating a distribution to ship Ubuntu on products. We had a lot of experience patching packages that we needed to improve for our customers, as well as sharing those packages upstream. But it's very similar to developing a distribution, is packaging up a distribution, improving it, and getting it ready to ship on hardware. So we felt comfortable with the process and what it was to develop a distribution. And over the course of the few years before that, Ubuntu had moved a lot of their focus to phone. And there is obvious and I think good strategy there. It's unfortunate that it didn't work out in the end. I really would have loved to see Ubuntu Phone have been successful.
Yeah.
But I think Canonical and Ubuntu said that we're going to pull back investment from the desktop and from Unity and realign our investments to the places where we're making money as a business. It makes complete sense to me for them to do that. And they should. I want a healthy and strong Canonical in our ecosystem. I think that's better for everyone. So those are intelligent moves. But System76 our business is the Linux desktop. This is everything we do every day is the Linux desktop. And Ubuntu was spinning, their revenue stream and their business model was based on the cloud at this point. So them pulling back there, that means we needed to fill in the gap of that investment. And so we started investing more in the desktop. We had already been wrapping up over time because as their focus kind of shifted to Ubuntu Phone, it wasn't on the product we were shipping. We were needing to fill in the QA gap, the engineering. We started managing NVIDIA drivers ourselves and a lot of kernel patches and a lot of other things.
So you were effectively halfway there already.
Right.
But did you ever look at any other distributions and think, well, maybe we could just switch to this instead? Was that something you entertained?
It wasn't distributions so much as I think that would have pulled the rug out of our customers by too much. And maybe unnecessarily so. There's a lot of good technology and happening in other distributions. I like what's happening in Clear Linux. I like a lot of the stuff that's happening in Solus, but I think that would have been too much of a departure for our customers. And I feel like we could solve a lot of their problems that we knew already just by starting to peel off this low-hanging fruit that existed in the experience. Things like having a separate ISO for NVIDIA. We knew our customers had to use no mode set and other like grub settings just to get into their system and restore. Because one of our principles was that when we ship an Ubuntu product, you don't need a separate restore media to install it. You use the Ubuntu ISO. That rule means that you have a good method to get your customer back, and you don't push too far outside of what's necessary to operate the computer. So we built the NVIDIA ISO because customers were having so much trouble restoring their computers with NVIDIA, and we knew that the only way to do that well and to do that right would be to have NVIDIA on the ISO itself, which essentially eliminated all the problems with installing a distribution on NVIDIA hardware.
If I'm not mistaken, you guys kind of pioneered that idea.
Right.
And it was a great idea that, reduced a lot of friction for a lot of people. But Canonical has come along and said, okay, we're going to put the NVIDIA driver on the ISO now. But how is what you're doing different than their approach?
If NVIDIA is on the ISO, it doesn't mean it's necessarily active, the driver is active. And the difference between our Intel ISO and the NVIDIA ISO is that the NVIDIA driver is active. And new hardware, new NVIDIA GPUs requires a new NVIDIA graphics driver, and it requires it to be active because the support isn't available in Nouveau yet. So having it on the ISO is a good step, and being able to tick a checkbox to install it within Ubiquiti is great. But if that hardware isn't supported by Nauvoo, then you have the same problem that you're not able to boot.
So let's say I get a Thelio with an RTX 2080 Super in there,
right?
But I'm using Ubuntu, which boots with the Nouveau driver. I'm going to get a black screen unless I go do with the flags, the no mode set or whatever, right?
Yeah, and that's the big difference. You really have to have it both on the ISO and to active. And to do it, you have to have two separate ISOs. There's not really a technical way around that from what we've been able to tell so far. It means double the testing. It means more builds, but it's definitely worth the effort to ease the pain for our customers.
If you could name one or two things that you wish most people knew about Pop! OS that seems to be kind of under the radar, what would that be?
The first thing is the QA team behind it and the amount of testing that goes in. So we're venturing further and further into the stack with engineering, and I think that's present, and a lot of people are seeing that value that we're adding. What they don't see is this QA team behind the scenes that's testing every single patch, that's moving back and forth between customers, the support team, and the engineering team to kind of develop this product and ensure that its quality is every time we do something, its quality is exceeding what the previous release that we had done. They're like the unsung heroes of Pop's quality and the experience people are seeing.
What does your QA process look like when there's a new release? When there's a big new kernel update, things? What are you actually testing?
So everything depends on what you're doing. If it's a new feature, then what they'll do is determine a test plan for that feature, and that test plan will be present in the GitHub repository. So a lot of times you can even see the tests that are conducted.
Oh, neat.
Right. And the test plan is just these are the things that you do to try to break what the engineers are doing. and there's some art to it. There's some science, but there's a lot of art to QA. And I think that has to do with the people that you bring on. You can do unit tests, you can do a lot of other things, but when things just don't look right or don't feel right, that's more intuition, and that's the person that you're hiring to do that work, or that's taking on that job. So if it's a Linux kernel, then that's a heavy amount of testing across a large set of hardware, all current chipsets, all current CPUs, all current graphics drivers, and usually one series back as well. And those are all fully tested before anything ships. ISO testing has a long list of things that are unique to it as well. All of our hardware has to boot directly from the ISO, and the installation has to work. The encryption has to work.
And so that's to be clear, that's all hardware in all configurations, right?
You don't have to do it quite that way.
Oh, okay.
You can cover you can have a SATA drive in one computer. You're covering SATA controllers. So there are different SATA controllers. So you might have a couple of SATA controllers you need to cover. NVMe is a solid standard. So if you have NVMe in one, you're covering that. So what you do is you build a hardware matrix. So you can do a full boat testing on something like 10 machines. Really, it doesn't take a whole lot. It just takes time.
Something that I have noticed in my admittedly kind of short Linux journey is, I love bleeding edge hardware. Mm-hmm. I love when, Radeon 5700 XT comes out, Zen 2 comes out, this new hardware that I'm reviewing and testing. And then of course I'm going to turn around and, all right, I'm done with the Windows review. The obligation is done. Let's throw Linux on this stuff. And this last cycle of hardware releases was really frustrating. Because Zen 2 came out and on launch day it wouldn't boot. I believe it wouldn't boot on any distro at all. And then the Radeon 5700 XT had very limited support. But you guys are selling this stuff day one. And so I don't know. I guess what I'm asking is what needs to be done to better embrace people like me and embrace people who are wanting to be early adopters and go out and get that bleeding edge hardware and have it just work on whatever distro they want. What has to change in the whole ecosystem for that to happen?
So we take hardware support. Hardware support is just fundamental to what our business is and what we're doing. So it's a priority to ensure that the latest hardware is working on Pop! OS. That is not us alone by any means. There's a tremendous amount of work that comes from AMD and Intel and the open source community that enables this. And the distribution's job is, besides some patching of potentially that capability, that hardware enablement, is integrating it into the distribution so that it works well. Because hardware is our business, we're paying attention to everything that's coming out, and we're watching those patches, and we're excited to pull them in earlier and get them tested because we want to ship the latest hardware to our customers. So we are incentivized by our customers and our business model to ensure that support exists there.
Okay.
We also have the hardware.
I've talked to so many of these guys, and they don't, some of them don't have a 4K monitor. Some of them don't have the newest generation of Radeon cards or NVIDIA cards. And so that would present a big challenge.
Right. It's not only challenging, but what that requires that you trust the changelog in a driver or something. And that's something we don't trust. So we see Navi support come for the 5700 XT from AMD, and we know that doesn't necessarily mean it really works. Not to our standards, not something that we could ship to our customers. And sure enough, being a new architecture, this one took longer than most others. Having the hardware means we don't have to trust it and say, oh, hey, everybody, now it works on Pop without having tested it. And then people go out there and do it and it doesn't work. We know something works before we ever talk about it.
Okay.
And I think that that's only possible if you have, the hardware and the team testing it.
So what happens if, let's say, I buy an Oryx Pro from you, but I don't like Pop! OS? I want to put Peppermint on it, or I want to put Arch on it. How do you support those do you support those customers if they choose to put a different distro on the machine? They like the machine, but they maybe don't like the OS. Right. So what does that change kind of the way you support the customer?
Well, there's a couple of things. So Pop! OS and Ubuntu are supported platforms, and they're what go through testing, and they're what's official. So we have full confidence in what we're delivering. But we love open source. We don't care if it's Pop that you're using. That's our flagship, and that's what we're shipping. But if you want to switch to another distribution, it's your computer, and you should be able to do that. But it is, because we're bleeding edge, there's no way for us to guarantee that all these different distributions will work.
Right.
And so it's a lot easier supporting additional desktop environments, for instance. Here at our own office, we have people that are using i3 and Sway and KDE and XFCE and all the different people here use what they want. But we all pretty much use the Pop base.
Okay.
But our customers install different desktop environments and different distributions, and we help them as much as we possibly can. We can't put a lot of engineering resources behind that.
But you will make the effort to help them even if they're not on a supported official distro for the hardware. Yeah,
and the engineering effort really is bringing in the newest support into that distribution, and that's on that. And that will come to that distribution. It might be just a little bit later.
Cool. Well, we talked about a lot of stuff that's coming to Pop! OS. Do you want to talk about a few of those things that maybe you're most excited about?
Yeah, certainly. So we've been working upstream with GNOME on hybrid graphics. Our vision for hybrid graphics is enabling the user to opt into using the NVIDIA GPU on their machine whenever they launch an application. So there's another concept that is to right-click on an icon and choose to launch it on the NVIDIA GPU, which is good, but that also means you can't use search and launch on the NVIDIA GPU, and those things it's not consistent, right? Because it depends on you selecting it each time.
Okay.
So we intend to add a toggle to offer the user the ability to launch it there, or launch it on the NVIDIA GPU. That would be inside of applications. That's where we think it's best fit, and we'll be working with GNOME to see that our vision there aligns. There's new updates to Switcheroo. We've been working with that maintainer to enable this functionality. There's new updates to the System76 Power Daemon, which adds hybrid support. So you can boot into Intel, but I don't consider this a complete feature. There's a couple of things. One, applications have to support the right libraries to run on the NVIDIA GPU. So problem with that is you might right-click on an application and say run on the NVIDIA GPU, but if that application doesn't support it, you are actually still running on your Intel GPU, and that's just not a feature.
And you may not even know, right? I mean,
the customer can't know. Mm-hmm. So we've also been working upstream with freedesktop.org to have a flag inside of desktop files where the application developer can say this should run on the NVIDIA GPU.
That's cool.
Right. So that's going to be a kind of a community effort of helping users identify which applications don't have support yet, helping upstream application developers add support, and then the desktop operating system work of enabling toggling it on and off per the user's preference. We're also working on advanced tiling in GNOME, and I'm very excited about this one myself. I'm a huge i3 and Sway fan. I think it's a fantastic philosophy, the suckless philosophy around desktop computing. And honestly, for a while, we were thinking maybe we'll have an i3 session or a Sway session along with Pop. As we dug into it, the effort to build a product out of one of those would have been a major undertaking, and a lot of the good qualities that come from them, we felt like we could do that in GNOME proper, and instead of a separate session. So that's things like tiling by default, or launching applications tile by default, I think is the best way to say it.
Yeah.
So that means it takes up your full screen and then automatically divides your screen down as you launch more and more applications. It means navigating with the keyboard. We're also huge fans of keyboard navigation throughout the operating system, and one of the problems now is switching windows requires Super Tab. Super Tab is kind of terrible in a lot of scenarios. And so,
well, you're saying you typically can just fly right by the app that you want, and if you're you guys have an ultra wide. I think it's a super ultra wide, the same one that I have. And I mean, you can have a lot of applications and windows on there, and to be more productive and more efficient, you really want to just jump to exactly what you need without kind of, in effect, browsing for it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just mousing across on ultra wide it's terrible.
I lose my mouse cursor all the time.
Right.
So that's not.
But you know where you want to go. It doesn't matter where the mouse cursor is, right?
Yes.
So that's the concept that we're working on applying into GNOME is regardless of where you are, you know where you want to go, and we're going to make it really easy to jump there, whether it's another monitor or an ultra wide and 20 windows over. We'll make it simple to move to the window next to you, above, below, around you, but also all the way on the other side, and to move those windows around too. That's where we're putting a lot of thought and effort in right now.
I actually think that when you guys announced this, it got a round of applause from from everybody.
That was surprising. Yeah.
And I've had so many people come to me and, dude, you really should try i3. Use i3, and then all the responses to that are, but that learning curve, and I
like it. I have on my GitHub account, I have something called Sway Pop, and that's my Pop Sway configuration. So I've got step by step. So if you want to try it, you can just step by step set up your Pop with Sway and play with it.
But I think this is a great solution for people who don't want to leave the comfort of GNOME, which they're used to.
Well, you definitely lose stuff too when you move over to, like, one of the reasons it doesn't really make sense for us doing this separate session is, well, it's Sway and you've got tiling, or it's i3 and it's tiling, and you have the advantages there. But you click the wireless icon, it's opening up GNOME settings to Wi-Fi. And really, it's not this. It's not that polished when you lose some of the nice things like the notification center. Monitor settings are not there is no GUI in i3 for configuring displays.
And I should have mentioned this will be a GNOME extension, so it's not limited to Pop, obviously, and it can be simply installed on any GNOME desktop. Right.
We've thought about different approaches. We decided not to take go straight into Monitor. We think we can do this in a performant way using a shell extension, and it's a great place to experiment. We think we can do it really smoothly. And it's on the roadmap. There's a lot of work in progress, but so far we're optimistic.
Yeah, well, I did see it for a few seconds. I couldn't take any video, but it was impressive what I saw. So since we're talking about alternate desktops and things, have you guys ever entertained the idea of having, Pop KDE edition, anything like that, or?
We were spending so much. There's so much low hanging fruit. There's so many areas for improvement. If we spread that out to more desktop environments, other products will suffer.
That's fair. Yeah.
We're focusing our firepower on making a really, really great GNOME desktop, but always supportive of every open source project. We have nothing bad to say about any. People have good ideas come from everywhere, and I say just get out there, experiment, and build and create. I like hopping distro hopping, and I
love it.
I like trying different DEs. I just love Linux, and I think it would be a shame if it was all one color.
Well said. Well said. You guys were very successful at designing your own unique desktop. Everyone wants to know, is the same thing in store for laptops?
And it is. We intend to start in January or February with prototyping laptops. We're at the stage of, very simple, low-level things. We're going to be prototyping different chassis designs using different materials, testing longevity, testing, the different properties, the thermal properties of the materials, and whether fingerprints get stick on them, whether they feel good under your palm. Like those are the kind of things that we're working on now. It's really that we're going to work on the feel quite a bit. Once we feel like we've got that down, and it's not just a serial process. I shouldn't really say that. There's much more going on. We're working on keyboard controllers. We're working on supply chain for displays and touchpads and all those things simultaneously. But the part that I'm spending a lot of time on is the feel and the look of the laptop, and then we're going to marry that to these premium components that we're hand picking to put in this.
Do you have kind of a dream design in mind? And that obviously is not committing you guys to building it, but if you had the resources, what would a System 76 laptop, what would be unique about it?
Well, yeah, take what we did with desktop and our brand and our who we are. We want to express who we are, but also who our community is through the product that we designed, through the product's design. So Thelio is warm and inviting, and it's wood grain and rounded corners. It's not edgy. It's not flashing lights at you. It's kind of classy.
It's classy,
clean,
yeah. It's
sharp.
Yeah.
That's where we're going with laptop.
That's exciting.
The same kind of feel.
Any plans to get into gaming laptops?
We'll start with U-Class, most likely. So that's going to be like our daughter in Galago. Mm-hmm. Maybe move up into H-Class as well. NVIDIA is a whole nother beast, so we're going to tackle our ultra portables first, and then we'll move up.
That's a good move. Yeah, because I think those are obviously going to be the most popular. Yeah. Right?
I guess we didn't talk about some of the improvements to Thelio. Well, we did talk about Thelio.
Well, a bit, but...
Yeah, so one thing to share with your audience is that everyone that came to Superfan also got a prototype of the Rev 2 Thelio model. And this is all of our effort into improving the thermal capabilities of the chassis as well as its acoustic properties, all wrapped up into a product. So a lot of current customers will also benefit greatly from this. Just yesterday. How so? Well, yesterday we sent out the first code updates from the results of our tests, and we're cutting the typical audio sound or the noisiness of Thelio by 7 decibels. Like it's going from 40 decibels to 33.
Okay, and 30 decibels is a whisper, right?
30 is a whisper. 30 is also where our equipment zeroes out. We can't even measure under 30. Okay. So
that's a fairly substantial difference if we're in a really quiet environment like this one here. Right. Yeah.
And decibels are a logarithmic scale, so 40 isn't just 10 more than 30. 40 is a lot louder than 30.
Right.
It's dramatically different. So it will be immediately noticeable once customers update their update POP. And then there's additional acoustic properties and changes to this new design that make it sound. They increase the quality. We're moving to another cooler as well. There's a little bit of a whine that we don't like from from our previous cooler. So we're going to move to a Nashua cooler for new orders pretty soon. That's the other big news.
So it seems that's really cool. I mean, it seems like Thelio has been on this. It has been constantly iterated instead of just here's this design we locked in, and a year later we'll release it with some improvements. And I think that's a really cool approach.
We think of it like pop. If there's something that we can make better, it's odd not to do so. And now that we can do this because we have a factory now. If there's a change that is going to improve the product, we just put it in, we start cutting it, and now we're shipping it.
Has the creation of your factory impacted pricing at all? Has that been able to kind of cut some costs, and have you been able to pass that on to customers?
We've had a couple things happen. So in the beginning, our costs to produce were pretty high, and our margins were squeezed because we wanted to be competitive. But over the course of the year, we added such a tremendous amount of efficiency into the process that we were able to reduce the cost dramatically, reduce the price dramatically, be extremely competitive for the quality of the product and in its class, and produce all the things here in Denver, Colorado.
Which is really cool.
And so
definitely a level of pride that goes into that.
Right. Yeah. There's, I don't think that we're at any competitive disadvantage. The opposite is true. Now we have such a substantial advantage because we can very rapidly respond to our customers in ways that are impossible when changes take 6 months from ODMs and, halfway across the world.
Mm-hmm. So I've been covering PC tech for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I've been to, I've interviewed a lot of companies. I've been to a lot of press events. I've seen all manner of approaches to creating and marketing hardware. And there's something that walking into your home here in Denver, there's something that just felt really different to me. And I was trying to describe this to my wife, and I was just coming up short for words, but the first thing that really jumped out at me is like, these are just a bunch of cool, normal people.
Yeah.
They're not, your team is not posturing. They're not trying to, fake their way through an event like this. They're having fun and they're being real. And I don't like, how do you foster that? How do you get all that in a room together? It's really hard for me to describe, but it just feels different, this company. The people here are just a little different.
Well, there's a couple of things to it. First, it's our approach to our daily life as a company. I've seen companies that are very, very strict, and they have a lot of rules around how things are accomplished and done, and there's red tape and things. People are maybe walking on eggshells a lot of times because they're worried about moving forward or taking a risk or doing something. Okay. Then there's the opposite side that's just a total Wild West, and they never even release a product. They spend 2 years on that thing, and then that thing ever ships. I try to put our team somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
I like to be academic. I like to explore potential avenues that we maybe haven't thought of before. A lot of exploration, or a lot of things we're doing today, started out with somebody just on the side tinkering with something. Ian just started, playing with a theme, and he said, "Hey, I made this thing." I was like, "That looks really good," and Matt did really well. Hey, and slowly pop came to fruition. Jeremy started working on keyboard controllers because 3 years ago he was thinking about how are we going to make laptops. Well, maybe we should start doing, experimenting with embedded controller software now, and so he started doing that type of work. But then we also have our responsibilities, and we have strict QA and things like that. So we try to balance academic exploration, responsibilities, product development, getting to release, and just I think we've hit our stride with what that balance should be. So we're both able to deliver quality features, be innovative, and we're not tied by fears of failing either. We've had a lot of successes over the years, and each one we've done something a little bit bigger. Building a factory was big.
That's got to be a huge. That was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Did that feel risky?
It certainly did. It's very, very risky. This is millions of dollars in investment to make this thing.
Not to mention actually learning how to do it, right?
And learning how to do it, yes. And the thing is, because we had been successful doing brand new things that we hadn't done before over and over again, we weren't afraid about the team being able to execute and do this. And And it worked out, and it's succeeded in the last year tremendously. And so we're not afraid of moving into laptops or the next big thing.
Cool. Yeah.
On the people side, we're really picky about who comes on the team. We have a process that I think works really well to identify the people that are experts in the domain that they're going to be like overtaking here or handling here. I think that's part of the genuine feel that you get, is that these are experts in their field and the work that they're doing. So they don't have to fake it. They really know what they're doing. And that's true of everyone in every position here.
You know, I just figured out how to end this interview. I'm going to ask you a really tough question.
Yeah.
You guys have been growing fairly quickly from what I can see. What do you attribute to your growth? What is the one thing that you attribute most to the success, let's call it the success,
right,
of System76?
Well, it's actually not that hard of a question. The reason is because there is no one thing. The only way to be successful, in my view, is to do a lot of things really well. So that means building a good product. That means having a good team that's behind it, supporting it. It means it's friendly, knowledgeable salespeople that when you call in and you're talking about the machine learning or AI work that you're doing, that the person on the other side knows what you're talking about. It's that the marketing department is in tune and understands the needs of your customers and what matters to them so that they can speak to them in their own language. These are all necessary, I think, to deliver a good product and to succeed.
Well, thank you for such a great talk. It's been just a blast. I don't know. I'm not feeling very eloquent at this point because it's been a lot of travel and a lot of fun. But this has been a really unique experience, and I can tell that you guys just poured your heart and soul into it. It's been great. I have in front of me Kate Hazen, the creative director at System76.
Yeah.
And as someone who was kind of just starting to come into the Linux fold when Thelio was happening, or at least being planned,
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of kind of the mythos and the story behind the name. And I mean, because when you're creating your first product from the ground up, it's probably like naming a band, right? It's impossibly hard.
It's like it's naming a whole new reality, basically.
So, I mean, can you take us quickly through the whole process of how you guys came up with the name and what inspired it and kind of what was the story behind the name?
Yeah. Well, it is Thelio.
Thelio. Yeah, I mispronounce it all the time.
And it's okay. You're
Thelio.
not the only one. I have said Thelio to people. I've coached people on Thelio, and even employees will still try and say Thelio. It's not an anglicized word. It is taken from Greek origins because I almost got my degree in linguistics instead of graphic design.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I am a uber nerd, but it's just a different kind of nerd. Anyway, but Thelio, originally it was codenamed Mimas, and it was one of the moons of, I think that's Jupiter.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Watch me be wrong about that.
I can edit that out. It's all right.
Thank you. And we didn't know what we were going to call it. So at the time, the marketing squad, I wouldn't even call this totally a department at that point, and Carl, we did an offsite in the mountains that was all about trying to come up with the name. The name was the most important. We had to further synthesize our brand into this whole new reality of manufacturing desktops from the ground up from this company.
No pressure?
Crazy time. Yeah. So, no pressure at all. And we spent the first day and a half just banging our heads against the proverbial brick wall. And, we're trying to think, well, should it be like an asteroid? Should it be named after this and that and this other kind of celestial body, or maybe this sort of cluster of things. And we kept trying to ground it in existing reality. And then we got out of the Airbnb that we were staying at, I think, and we went on a hike. And then at some point, Carl and I were just talking about things, and I forget what he said, but it was something along the lines of like gearing the idea more into a fictional realm. And I don't know what he said, but I stopped in the middle of the path and said, what if it's not real? Like, what if this doesn't exist yet and it's entirely fictional? And then that just blew open the entire idea. So then eventually, through a lot of linguistic nerdery, hit
Interesting.
Telos, which is Greek for purpose or meaning.
Okay.
And Helios for sun. And then it came down to Thelio, which I pulled from Telos and Helios and IO board, but also 1-0 being binary. And so that's why we lost the S.
That's kind of brilliant.
So it's an invented word, but it means, the purpose.
It means so many things.
Yeah, we're meant for the stars. We're meant for transcending what's been done before. So it's, and then it evolved. I was already building robots and this sort of sci-fi brand canon. Mm-hmm. And that was just the next step. And suddenly all of these parts of the story were falling into place, that Thelio was this fictional solar system that we haven't fully explored. We don't know how many planets. We don't know how many celestial bodies are in it. But we're starting to branch out into this new reach of the universe.
That's interesting. So in a way, so you've created a new universe for this new product.
Yeah.
And I guess by that concept of not having explored it all, it's kind of a reflection of the company having this wide open area of possibility, right? Where
we are not sure what's going to happen or what we're going to set our sights on next, within this realm. I mean, we know where we're headed ultimately in our next steps, but we started with, I was pulled in to rebrand the company, and started with Mortimer, who was our first robot, who destroyed the old website and the old brand and made way for something new. And then Quentin came along. He was the next. He's in our Unleash Your Potential T-shirts and the sticker. That's Quentin. He has 2 eyes because Roman numeral 2. He was the second robot. And then Melvin is the desktop sentinel, which was also, he shows up in a cameo at the end of the Thelio launch narrative. That was that animated interactive experience online. Those 3 robots landed on Earth, and they brought us this like new technology from beyond, and that is essentially the groundwork for Pop OS. And our first foray into trying to take that technology and build off of it, a la open source, was the Ideas Made Real Conceptabots thing, where we brought kids into our office and we gave them these robot pieces 2-dimensionally, and they built robots out of these pieces in GIMP. Cool. And then what we didn't tell them was that we were going to 3D print the robots that they designed in real life. Oh, I bet they were thrilled. Oh my goodness. Watch that video. It's on our YouTube channel. Okay. I got so choked up in the moment, and every time I watch that video, I'm just like, because they're so excited to create things. They're kids, right? They're totally open to anything. And so that was our Conceptabots. That was, it's a little steampunk because we printed it with iron filament. There's nothing wrong with little steampunk. No. And shout out to Ben, Vague Entertainment, who was one of our super fans and we've continued to work with occasionally because he loves robots too. So he's constantly doing cool projects with them, and I don't know. I tap back into his expertise anytime I can. So what do you think I know this is a very forward-looking question, but I just talked to Carl about the idea for, well, not the idea.
I've just talked to Carl about the plans for prototyping some laptops in-house.
Yep.
Do you think that the that kind of theme around the marketing will carry forward with that line as well?
Yes, but
expand that universe.
It will
so to
not
speak?
be from the same system.
Aha.
Because laptops are
They're very different, yes.
from desktops, so they are coming from a completely different region of space. So I don't foresee them being Thelio laptops.
Okay,
They will be
right.
their own entity.
But I get the sense that they'll kind of have that same System76
Mythos,
and also maybe even kind of that visual stamp.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm hoping. I don't know that
the
they'll
mountain
have the wood,
scenery.
Yeah, I don't know that they'll
and-
have the wood grain. I don't know that that's
Right,
you know,
right.
or whatever other kind of natural resource is abundant in
Yeah,
that.
I just feel like
we're open.
I feel like what we saw with Thelio, we will see some interpretation of that on the laptop. Something
Yeah.
that says this is
Beauty,
distinctly a System
refinement,
76 piece of hardware.
and a touch of whimsy. That's
well,
what.
you said it much better.
Well, I've been doing this for 5.5 years now, and I mean, and so that's what we went through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is Simon. He's our 500 error. Hopefully you don't see him. But
Okay.
He's adorable. and spoiler alert, he'll be showing up more on social media going forward.
Oh, okay.
6 for the robots. And then the 7 series is Zoe, who's in the initial setup process, and her sisters, which you will also see more of coming up soon.
Wow, it sounds like there should be maybe a graphic novel at this point for. Oh, okay, all right.
I have ideas.
Breaking news.
I have so many hopes and dreams tied into the robots. But as we continue to, they are research and discovery, reflecting R&D as we went through that process. They are going to eventually touch on a new reach of space. So I don't know who the 8th gen robots are yet. I haven't met them. But the 7th gen robots, the 7 sisters, are currently exploring the reaches of space. And we'll see what they come up
That's a lot more backstory than I was expecting. It really is.
with. So much more than I mean, not even everyone at the company knows that, but like Alex, my copywriter, and I, we have ambitions, and Joshua, our marketing director, he's all for leaning into the robots, and Carl has always been like, yeah, robots. Like,
Yeah.
heck yeah, we're
I
robots.
grew up in love with the Transformers, so that
Exactly.
speaks to me. Yes. Roll out.
Absolutely. Like Carl has, I was talking him up last night at the bar, but Carl has such a knack for finding the right people to hop on the nerd bandwagon.
We had a good chunk of our conversation was about that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just good people who are excited about just creating things and doing their best work and leaning into exactly the kinds of people that we already are. Because, I mean, when I first started, the whole point was we are not another tech brand. We are not just another computer company. We want to be something else. We want to be set apart, but not just for marketing purposes. We feel like something else. We're not in Silicon Valley. We're in Denver. We're in the middle of the mountains where it's all rustic, and we like to hike, and we like craft coffee and beer. And,
Yes.
and we're the kinds of people we want to hang out. And we want you to come hang out with us. And we have some elevated tastes, but we're still we want to have fun. We just want to have fun.
Okay, this kind of brings up a really interesting question. So System76 is an OEM. It is a Linux distribution creator. It's a hardware company.
Yeah.
But what is System76? How do you encapsulate that in maybe 3 or 4 words? What kind of company is System76?
It's a team of creators, makers, and builders creating, making, and building for other creators, makers, and builders.
That was more than 4 words, but it was mostly the same. It was mostly the same 4 words, so
right?
I'll allow it.
It's
okay.
We are fun dorks. System76. It's our new company motto.
All right. I hope I see that
Carl.
I hope I see that on the website on Monday. System76. We're fun dorks.
Dorks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that very illuminating story.
And this is
that was really fun to learn about.
Where I am.
Okay, before I let you go, what is kind of your next big project or adventure here?
I'm working on it right now, but
does it have anything to do with a holiday?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it have anything to do with community?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else you can tell me? Robots. All right.
Robots.
Well, hopefully we'll hear more about it soon.
Yep.
Thanks, Kate.
So thank you.
Well, everybody, that is going to do it for episode 18 of Linux for Everyone. I really hope you enjoyed this. A fraction of the amount that I enjoyed actually hanging out with these people and learning so much. I still have so much to unpack, and I think there's going to be more content to come, and I'll definitely be talking about that Thaleo once I get back home and start putting it through the paces. As always, I want to thank all of my patrons and everyone who listens to the show, everyone who comments, who lifts me up, who gives me suggestions and feedback, and just makes this so much fun. And a huge shout out to System76 for being a class act. I'll talk to you next week for episode 19, and until then, take care, and take care of each other.